First of all, appreciate everybody coming out to cover and support Penn State football. Appreciate that. As you can imagine, it's been a crazy couple weeks since the season has ended. Coaches and staff running in 1,000 different directions. Grades are coming in right now, getting some really good news there, which is great. Always, the academic aspect of it, how important that is to us. So those things are starting to trickle in right now, so that's been really good. Obviously, our guys getting some time off, which is always a fine line. Guys with bumps and bruises at the end of the year, just trying to get healthy. Players getting away from us a little bit, us getting away from them. Is probably always healthy, as much time as we spend together, as the year goes on. And then obviously trying to balance some of the practices that we're doing this time of year, as well as the academics, as well as the recruiting and the coaches running in 1,000 different directions. So, look forward to Wednesday with signing day to get a good portion of that kind of put behind us. Looking forward to this weekend, getting some really good practice work, which at this time, as you guys know, for us is more about fundamentals and technique and good on good, with sprinkling a little bit of Kentucky in there each day. And then as we get closer, obviously we shift that. Our GAs have done an outstanding job of doing all the breakdowns for us, that the coaches have been kind of able to look over on the road and things like that. But obviously we're going to have to get hot and heavy on Kentucky here, and kind of working through the details. Typically we game plan on offense, defense, and special teams as a staff. So although we've been able to get some work done kind of individually as coaches, it's not really how we do things. So we need to be able to kind of sit in a room, for a number of hours as a staff and kind of iron out all the specifics and the details from a planning perspective. So this is how we've done it, really for the last 8 years. So I think we got a good plan and a good model, but we're always looking to try to, kind of get better and polish and refine. So that's about all I got. Open it up to questions, and appreciate again everybody coming out and supporting Penn State football.
Raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
I like the beard, by the way. Your beard game is strong.
I'm playing Santa Claus tomorrow.
You haven't done that before, have you? I don't remember you doing it.
Not since we've met, no.
I like it.
I'll pass that along to the person I live with.
Good.
Yeah.
Dave?
James, what stands out to you about Josh Allen, and is there anybody in particular that he reminds you of?
Well, first of all, I was following him on Twitter and sending him a bunch of direct messages like, "Hey, you may want to save yourself for the draft," but that he didn't. Obviously, that didn't work. I think the biggest thing is his length and his athleticism and how twitchy he is. Obviously, when you're considered the best defensive player in college football, and the way he's been able to impact the game in so many different ways. That's probably what's been so impressive. How twitchy he is, how productive he is, his length. In terms of what those guys are looking for at the next level, he kind of fits the model. It's interesting because we have a lot of discussions in recruiting and with some of our own players that kind of say, well, am I a 3-4 outside linebacker at the next level? Because some guys may be undersized and how they look at each other. Well, this guy's 260 pounds. So I think like anything, you're always looking for the biggest, the strongest, the most athletic guys that you can use in a variety of different ways. And I think it's a really good example of that. So obviously the chess match, like always, is they're trying defensively to put him in situations to make plays. And we're trying to do the same thing formationally. How can we do things formationally to limit his impact? And same thing from a scheme standpoint. And obviously we better have an awareness of where he is on every single play. So, that's kind of the chess match constantly. what can we do formationally, what can we do with some motions and things like that, to limit his impact.
James, have you had a chance to sit down with any juniors who might be thinking of entering the draft? And secondly, do you expect to have everybody available for the bowl game who's physically available?
Yeah, so obviously it's a fluid conversation. That's constantly evolving and changing. Just so you guys know, I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, so literally the Sunday after our last regular season game, I met with all of them. So we tried to schedule ahead of time with their parents because they were in town for the game, so they could stay over and we could meet the next morning. Their position coach and myself, and then we had put together basically a whole presentation. Because to me, it's not about convincing them to stay. It's let me give you all the information that I can get based on my resources and contacts so that you can make an educated decision and make a great decision. Where I think people struggle with sometimes is they think the coach is always going to tell the guy to come back. I told Saquon Barkley a year before, his last season that he needs to leave. Obviously at the end of the season it was a pretty easy decision, but I told him a year before. So for us, where I think people kind of get confused there is it really should be a very complimentary process in decision making. And what I mean by that is if the guy leaves early and he's a first or second round draft choice, that's good for him and his family. That's also good for Penn State football. If he leaves early and gets drafted very late or not drafted at all, that's bad for him and his family, and that's bad for Penn State football. So we're really working together here. And what you've done is over 6 years, the recruiting process, and once they've showed up on campus, that you develop that type of relationship with them and their family, that you have that trust. The hard part is, which I don't agree with, is we changed a rule a few years back and allowed the agents to be able to talk to our players from the time they're a freshman to the time they're a senior, where that was not the case before. It's another one of those rules that we decided to change because we don't feel like we can govern, and I don't think it's a good rule. So you got freshmen talking to agents right now. I mean, how is that good for anybody? So it's a battle. But I met with all those guys on Sunday, had really good conversations, but the conversation wasn't like, we're deciding today. It's here's the information, let's continue talking about this. Make sure you include us in the process so we can help and guide and be prepared because it impacts us as well. And that's constantly going. So nothing new right now at this point. Right now, we're planning on having everybody for the game, but again, that changes. And I think sometimes I'll meet with you guys and tell you something, and then a few days later, it's different. And it's not that we, weren't upfront with you guys and transparent. It's just it changes. It changes weekly, it changes daily, and you have the academic component that factors into this. You have the financial component that factors into this. You have their family situation, that factors into this as well. And then, what I always try to tell our guys is, why would you ever declare early in the process? Because say you're a kicker. I'll use that as an example because I don't know if Blake's coming out early. But say you're a kicker and you decide to come out early and you make that decision after the last game, and then between then and the draft, 15 other juniors come out early. Why would you make that decision? You want to have as much information as you possibly can to make a great decision, and the later you can do that, the better.
James, you've talked glowingly about Trace on a macro, big picture level as he enters his final game with Penn State. What's he meant to you? What's he meant to this program?
Yeah, for us, and probably for a lot of programs, but for us specifically, it is so much more than football and what Trace has done on the field. Obviously, the records speak for themselves. But you know, it's sitting in Trace's. I remember, you know, his home visit was a breakfast. I remember sitting in his house having breakfast with his family. You know, and you know, the relationship that we had with them. You know, his mom, his dad, his sister, Trace, and just watching him grow and watching him evolve and watching him have success on the football field, watching him have success academically. You know, it's so much more for us, you know, than football. And those relationships is really important to me. Being able to go to the National Football Foundation, you know, banquet last week as a whole family. Mom and Dad were there. Trace was there, kind of talking to them a couple weeks ago about what that experience is going to be like and what a big deal that is. And for Carrie to be inducted, to, you know, the same weekend as Trace is being honored, you know, it's just special. You know, so. You know, I hope guys like Saquon and I hope guys like Trace show our players, our young players, that when you trust and that when you invest in the things that we're asking them to do, you got a chance to have, you know, a really good career and maximize your career. That's going to be different for every single one of them. But they're two guys that really kind of showed up on campus and never really questioned. You know, what we asked them to do, they did, because they understand every time we ask them to do something, it's based on two things: what's in the program's best interest and what's in their best interest, or we wouldn't be asking you to do it. And those are guys that have done it, and with that, really, you know, really have been able to maximize their experience here at Penn State. That's with community service, that's with academics. You know, that's with them kind of growing as human beings, and then obviously football players as well. So you know, I think he's a really good example. You know, and the same thing, the parents have been a part of the process. You know, parents are very comfortable picking up the phone and calling me when things come up, mom and dad. So it's so much more than football for us here at Penn State.
James, Juwan Johnson had a big sophomore year, has not matched it this year. Could you just talk about his season and, you know, what you see from him, not only this bowl game, but in the future?
Yeah, you know, I think he's going to have a big bowl. I think he's going to have a big bowl game. I think he's going to have a great offseason. I think he's going to have a really bright future. You know, obviously faced a little bit of adversity this year, but, you know, I think it's a positive. You know, that's kind of how we view things like that. You embrace it. He's going to grow from this. He's going to learn from this, not only as a football player, but as a man. And it's no different than any other adversity or challenge you face. If you approach it with the right mindset, you'll grow from it. And you'll probably grow more than you would, you know, through success or things going easy. So, you know, Juwan's been an unbelievable teammate since he's arrived on campus. He's always been a guy that's invested a great deal, and I think the team sees that. You know, but what's also interesting is, you know, when you're young, you think life is fair, and if I invest this, then I should get an immediate return on my investment. But it doesn't work like that. And you know, whether it's the big man upstairs or whether it's just you know, the game of football and you know, kind of what we talk about, if you love the game and if you respect the game and if you invest in the game, it will pay back. You know, the game respects people that view it the right way and treat it as such. And I believe in that. I believe that in the game of football. I believe that in life, that it's going to happen. You know, when it happens and how it happens, I'm not sure. But I think you know, Juwan's a great example of that. And you know, I'm excited about how he's going to play in this game. Like a lot of guys, and I don't get into it with you guys, sometimes I think it's good, sometimes I question whether it's the right approach or not. But you know, Juwan, like a lot of guys, he had some things that were kind of messing with him physically during the year that I don't come in here and necessarily talk about. So those things factor into it as well. But he's healthy, obviously, now, you know, I know our quarterbacks are excited to throw the ball to him, and he did some really good things at the end of the year. So, you know, excited about what he's going to do.
John?
James, when you look at Kentucky's rush offense, not only is it Benny Snell, but All-American guard Punchy Stallings, and you got a scrambler in Terry Wilson. Is it reassuring to know that a lot of the onus there will be on arguably your best unit in your defensive line?
Yeah, I think it helps, and I think our linebacker unit has really kind of grew as the season has gone on. But yeah, I don't think there's any doubt, that it helps. But it's going to be a challenge. That's the other chess match. They're going to be trying to do things formation-wise to try to get an advantage in the box based on numbers or leverage or angles, and we're trying to find a way, in each formation to have a numbers advantage and feel good about our angles and leverage and things like that. And that's the chess match that happens week in and week out. When they got a back like they do, who's been highly productive against really good defenses, and a guy who's also motivated, because from what I understand, it's like 100 yards away or something to breaking their record, so he's going to be motivated from that perspective too. But yeah, I think our D-line and our front seven with our linebackers has really evolved as the year has gone on. Playing with a lot of confidence right now, but that's going to be an important part of the game, is try to take the thing that they pride themselves on doing, which is running the ball, and try to limit the impact of that in the game.
Hey James, a lot of moving parts with coaches this time of the year. Do you expect to keep your staff intact? Are you trying to keep your staff intact beyond this season?
Am I trying to keep my staff intact beyond the season? Yeah, I'd like to keep our staff intact as long as possible. I think consistency is important, but I also understand that we're at a point in our profession and in this game where that's challenging. I think it's critical for us to try to do everything we possibly can to create an environment here that's competitive, but also an environment here where guys want to come to work and feel good about it, and their families do as well. But there's also going to be some opportunities that come that I want for our guys. I think you guys have heard me say this before. I think guys have a chance to be head coaches, and guys have a chance to be play calling coordinators, very specifically play calling coordinators. I want that for them. But we can't lose guys for lateral moves. That cannot happen with the type of program that we have and for the type of program that we want to be. That's critical. That's critical. So again, just like the players that we're talking about, it's fluid. I get phone calls every day. I'm in the car for recruiting and coaching our players and checking on academics and all those types of things. I'm constantly getting calls about our current staff. I'm constantly getting calls about coaches that have worked for me in the past, things like that. So it's constantly something that we need to be aware of. And me and Sandy are always having kind of conversations and dialogue about it, and kind of what's going on in the industry, and something that we both need to be aware of, and kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and have an awareness. So that's been good, but it's every day. It's every day.
Tom?
Hey James, how are you?
Good, Tyler.
Good. I know you mentioned you've been all over the country the past few weeks. When you're living out of a suitcase and bouncing around towns like that, what's the most challenging aspect of that stretch run with the contact period? And what's the most rewarding aspect? And then from last year to this year, did you take some major nuggets that you learned last year from the early signing period that you attempted to apply to this one? Was it anything substantial?
Yeah, I would say overall, I think it really just depends on your model. There's some programs that, they're going to wait to the end, and they're going to try to close out and flip guys and all that kind of stuff. For us, we're going to try to do our work year-round and try to have the majority of our class put together and set. So at this time of year, the official visits and things like that, and the home visits, it's really a celebration of their future. It's not going in and recruiting guys and the hard sell and things like that. And for the most part, we've done a good job of that. And for the most part, we've probably had less drama issues than most programs in the country that really look at it from that perspective. But then there's also the aspect where you got to go and close on the last few guys, and that's always challenging. I think the early signing period, for the most part, has done what it was intended to do. I think the feedback I've gotten from my staff, as well as other assistant coaches around the country and other head coaches around the country, and really from high school coaches and prospects, I think it's been pretty good. It hasn't played out a whole lot different than I think most people, thought it would, which was this is going to become the signing day. I don't know what the numbers are, but if I had to guess, it's probably 85% or higher. Probably as high as 95% that sign on the first signing day. The second signing allows you to maybe solve some problems, but I also know there's some kids that are kind of on the bubble. If you don't sign on the first signing day, it's going to be worse in the second signing day because there's going to be less prospects and still 129 schools scrambling to try to get them. For us, we'll know a little bit here in the next few days. The picture will get a little bit clearer for us, but we don't have a whole lot of spots left. So for us, what I've tried to do with the staff is make sure that our pool of quality candidates in terms of football, in terms of academics, in terms of fit for this community and for our program and for our team, that the pool is big enough so that when you do lose guys, which you will, you're not going to win them all. When you do lose guys, you still have enough other guys that you feel good about that you have a chance to close on. So, that's kind of where we're at. But nothing really kind of last year that kind of showed up that we weren't expecting. It kind of played out the way we expected it to play out, and the same way this year. Probably the biggest change is obviously we had some coaching changes last year. So getting guys to understand how we do things and how we operate, that's probably the biggest difference, between the previous year.
James, going off that, you mentioned the in-home visit kind of being a celebration. How do you manage all of that when you've been all over the map? You want to meet with these kids, meet with their families, and they're all putting food in front of you and those kinds of things. How do you guys handle all of that, plus all the logistics associated with bouncing everywhere in such a short amount of time?
The food, not well. As you can see, my head and my face has gotten bigger and bigger since the season has ended. Not a good look. But, besides that, our staff does a really good job of getting it organized. One of the things that's really good is some of the parents and some of the prospects are really good about, hey, like I talked about with Trace, we're going to have a breakfast home visit because it's hard to do all the home visits at night over dinner. Typically we'll do 2 a night, 3 a night. Starts to really push it, but for the most part, we're doing 2 a night. And a lot of times when we get to 3, it's a breakfast and then two evening ones. You try to get as many of them done early in the process as you possibly can to create as much flexibility on the back end, which is really good. And then another thing that's been good for us is a large percentage of our guys have already applied to school, already been accepted to school, and already paid their acceptance fee. So that changes some things under the NCAA rules that helps us too. But overall, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. One of the challenges for us is, we've been predominantly a regional program when it comes to recruiting. But as you guys know, I've tried to kind of expand that each year to be a little bit more national, because there's just going to be years where our region won't support a certain position, and we better have the ability to be able to go, a little bit further to get that done. I think that's what you see in this class. You see, a little bit of maybe some areas that we haven't been as active in the past. Hopefully that will open up some opportunities for us in the future as well. J1's obviously been a big part of that, but also our coaches all kind of recruit their position nationally, and I think you see a little bit of that. So, I think Pennsylvania, This year was a down year. I saw an article, I think, I read an article on the plane the other day, which I thought was interesting, talking about 30 years ago in the WPIL, there was 50 Division I prospects, and then it dropped 15 years later down to 30. I think this year there's 4. I think this year's 4. So there's some challenges when it comes to that. But that's obviously where the region is important, and also nationally, because we're also going to have years where it's really strong in Pennsylvania.
I want to ask you about walk-ons. It's in relation to Zach Simpson winning your walk-on award, but really just more in general of sometimes a walk-on, maybe they could have gone to a smaller school, gotten a scholarship and played a lot. You come to a big school, maybe you're going to play, maybe you're not, but what's it like whenever you can bring kids in, they get opportunities, they earn opportunities, conversations you have with them about playing time, just how valuable can some of those guys be with the impact they either make on the field or just being part of the program?
Really valuable, and I think you guys see we're taking a much different approach this year, and this will be our approach moving forward. Is we're gonna offer spots to a lot of these guys, and we're gonna try to compete with guys that have scholarships, whether that's 1AA scholarships, whether that's Division II scholarships, for those guys to be able to chase their dreams and come to Penn State and be that guy that is able to have a significant impact, whether that's playing in games or whether that's practice or whatever it may be. Obviously, the #1 selling point is to be able to come get a Penn State degree. That's #1 selling point. I think the other thing that's attractive is because of the resources and the support that we have, you're going to have the opportunity to be able to become the best football player you possibly can be, because of the strength and conditioning, because of the nutrition, because of the sports science, because of all those types of things. And the reality is, the way the NCAA is now, say you come here and you play for 4 years on the team and you graduate, but you never really kind of break in and earn a starting role. Okay, you graduate, you can still go do that now for your 5th year and work on a master's degree, or be able to play somewhere that 5th year, whether it's a 1AA or whether it's a Division II. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You still have an opportunity to chase your dream, and say as a 5th year, that, to me, that's a pretty marketable situation. You're a 5th year senior, you've been at Penn State for 4 years. You want to come back for your 5th year? Great, we'd love to have you. You want to move on and still play 1 more year of football and go somewhere and have a significant role, that's out there for you too. So for us, we're going to be pretty aggressive moving forward. That's been a big shift for us this year. You see guys turning down scholarships to come and walk on here at Penn State. I think that's going to be really important. If you look at the best programs in the country, they've been able to do that for a long period of time, and that's something that we're gonna continue working hard on.
Coach, you've coached against Mark Stoops during your time at Vanderbilt before. What are your thoughts on him as a coach, and how has this Kentucky program really evolved since the last time you saw them?
I like Mark a lot. We went out this summer and visited their program. There's a leadership summit that we do each summer, and it kind of rotates. I think 2 years ago was at Texas A&M, last year was at Kentucky. So I've been able to kind of obviously coach against Mark, but also this past summer being able to go out and do that leadership summit on Kentucky's campus and in their facilities is valuable from a number of different perspectives. #1, it's always great to talk about leadership and organizational structure. Also great to spend time, with Mark and kind of get to know him on a personal and professional level. So that's been really good. But then also all the other aspects, for me and Phil Eston, to be able to get on their campus and see Kentucky's facilities. There's an advantage of that. Kentucky's got phenomenal facilities. They've done a really good job there. So there's a lot of value in it. You look at, he obviously comes from a football family. Comes from a highly successful football family. I think about my time at Vanderbilt playing Kentucky. The Big Blue Nation is strong. I remember, we would play them in basketball, and the Big Blue Nation would take over Nashville. The blue would be everywhere. and you look what they've been able to do, just kind of steady, growth in the football program. Mark's done a really good job. I know their athletic director, I know a bunch of people in their administration, but it's been impressive. It's been impressive. You look at even the defensive end, outside linebacker, he's from New Jersey. They've been able to kind of find some guys, develop guys, and have done a really good job. So this will be an important game for both of us. Obviously, you want to win the game because it's the next opponent, but also sending the seniors out the right way is important. And then I also believe that it also propels you into spring ball and into the season as well. So there's a lot of reasons why this game is important for both programs.
We have time for 2 more questions. Anything else for Coach?
When you say time for 2 more questions, no one raises their hand, but don't pause. Go, just run.
I know one of the major benefits of going to a bowl game is the expanded area of practice, particularly for the younger players. For this additional month for your true freshmen, for guys who aren't necessarily involved in the field quite yet, what can they stand to gain from this, and what do you think is the most important things they can accomplish here in December?
I think it's good for a lot of different things. So I think it's really good for our GAs. Our GAs are high-level guys that have all coached full-time in other places. So it allows them to coach our players in individual script, run practices, compete against each other. I think it's really important for those guys in their development the way we do it. I also think it's really good for our young players. And this year we've been a little bit more aggressive in who's a part of those practices. So in the past, it was literally just the non-travel guys. Well, that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me the more I thought about it, so we've added. So basically, say you're a 3, or say you're a 2, and you're not getting a whole lot more than 10 reps a game, you need to be in that developmental practice. So we've kind of expanded that list to get more guys reps and more guys opportunities, meeting time, individual time, practice time, scrimmage time, all those types of things. So I think that's been really good. But I don't think there's any doubt, when you can get, say, 7 more practices, 7 more practices on top of the 15 spring ball practices. It's really kind of how it is, in my mind. Those 7 practices are an expanded spring ball practice. I think it's important how you do it. There's programs that I've been around that you probably don't want to hear this, and it probably doesn't sound great, but there's programs around the country that the players aren't necessarily looking forward to the bowl game. It's 15 extra practices. It's not fun. You don't have an indoor facility. You're outside, freezing your tail off. So I think it's really important in how you approach all of that. That the practices are fun, that they're getting better, that they're competitive. We've been fortunate. Our practices have been really good since we've been here. Guys like how we handle spring ball practices. And then obviously when you get into game week's game week. You got to do what you got to do to get ready to play those games. But my point to you is, I've been around programs where, it's just more practices. It's not about fun. It's not about getting better. It's not about those types of things. And you need great leadership in your locker room for that. You need a really good culture. But also it's important in how the coaches approach it as well.
You mentioned this program being about more than football, but bringing it back to the field. Is there a defining moment, specific moment that you can point to that really kind of defines what Trace has meant, whether it be in practice or in a game?
Yeah, I get asked those types of questions a lot, and I don't really kind of view things that way. I don't think it's ever about one moment. I don't think it's ever about one game. I think it's a combination of experiences. I think it's a combination of traits. It's not about a specific moment or a specific game, and I think that's what really tells Trace's story. I think that's what really tells our football team's story. It's Trace as a recruit. It's Trace as a student. It's Trace as a member of this community. It's Trace as a redshirt freshman. It's Trace as the starting quarterback. It's Trace handling success, it's Trace handling adversity. And that's for all of our programs. So, you know, I'm not a favorite moment guy. I'm not a favorite guy, game guy. I'm not a favorite food guy. I don't really look at life that way. It's about, you know, the big picture. It's about the complete experience. And, you know, that's what I think about when I think of Trace. I think it's a combination of traits and combination of experiences.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys.